podcast. I'm Dasha. How you doing, Anna?
I'm
good.
COVID.
I was just reading some Camille Paglia. All right, everybody. Welcome, Noties. Big announcement today. We're back to solo shows. Yes, that's right. Molly lasted 8 days and rage quit. She was like, I can't deal with this guy, Calacanis. No, the opposite. You're not going to believe it.
Don't say it.
She's public about it, isn't she?
It has. I don't know.
Oh,
It's posted on her Instagram story.
Oh,
yeah.
Okay. All right. I would err on the side of caution with these things.
All right, guys. I know everybody here is excited to chop up the news and have Molly tee it up. I hit it out of the park. Then I tee it up for Molly. She hits it out of the park. I'm very sorry, everybody. Big announcement. Molly got Omicron. So she lasted 8 full days and then called in sick on the 9th day. And for her, that is devastating because she is type A and she wants to win. And she is beside herself. She's like, I'm going to come in. And she sounds like Kathleen Turner right now. And so I talked to her last night. She's fine. She said on a scale of like 1 to 10, it was a 2, but today maybe a 5. So she's feeling a little under the weather. I said, listen, long weekend, take the long weekend. And we don't have a Sunday show or a Monday show because, listen, I made the decision we're going to properly, honor Martin Luther King. So all of my companies are now taking off. I used to do floating holidays where I let people choose because, somebody's Italian, they want to do Columbus Day. Somebody's Irish, they want to do St. Patrick's Day. Producer Nick's both, so he's taking advantage of both to, go out in Hoboken and whatever they do on those days. But for MLK Day, it feels like we really should, since we haven't done a great job for Black Americans historically in this country, far from it. That should just be a full stop holiday. So take the day off and think about what Martin Luther King stood for more now than ever. And we really could use a little nonviolent protest. And so let's get to the news. We got to get going here because I got to tape All In and deal with David Sachs's monologues in 20 minutes. So we're going to get right to the news. Let me get my show notes up here. And
I love how you can't get through even an MLK tribute without throwing some barbs about me drinking on St. Patrick's Day and Columbus Day.
Well, you're for me, it was like St. Pat's.
The most innocuous of tributes.
Listen, at this point, Columbus Day is an excuse for
Columbus
Italians.
Day doesn't even exist.
It barely does. When I was a kid in the 80s, Columbus Day was deadly serious. The Italians, we didn't have school on Columbus Day, and it was like...
Yeah, it's like that Sopranos episode where they're pissed about the Columbus Day parade getting canceled. And then they're all like, Furio's there. And they're like, Furio, aren't you mad? And he's like, no, he was from the North. I hated the North because he's Southern Italian. Southern Italians hate the North. Yeah.
It's so great how they have this incredible idea of Italian heritage in the Sopranos. That is completely incongruous and has nothing to do with Italy. And when they go to Italy, that is like the best episodes.
Yeah.
They don't speak Italian, but they feel so...
Yeah.
Like the fact that Silvio feels like this is...
Chris shows up and he's like, oh, you guys have heroin here? No way. Sweet.
Chris like, yeah. Cool.
I didn't know you guys had that here.
Oh, wow.
All right. We got to go.
Here we go. This week in Sopranos. All right, I'm going to start with the first. We're just doing 2 stories, folks. And thanks to the notice for showing up. 3, 2. All right, everybody. In our first story, and there is a tech angle here. On Thursday, the FBI arrested 11 members of the Oath Keepers on sedition charges. And the indictment is, just to use a word, insane. The New York Times reported the leader of the far-right organization Oath Keepers, Stuart Rhodes, was one of the people arrested. He's the person with the eye patch who you see all the time at Trump rallies or protecting Trump, etc. Prosecutors said it was a wide-ranging plot to storm the Capitol on January 6th to disrupt the certification of Biden's win. Important note for this story, a portion of the Oath Keepers' communication occurred on Signal. And now, of course, if you're listening to This Week in Startups, you know that's an encrypted chat app that is not supposed to have any backdoors, and it's not supposed to keep any user data. But according to the indictment, just 2 days after the election, Rhodes said the following on Signal: "We aren't getting through this without a civil war. Too late for that. Prepare your mind, body, and spirit." A month after Election Day, Rhodes wrote the following on Signal: "It'll be a bloody and desperate fight. We are going to have a fight. That can't be avoided. So let's pause on this and just digest. The Oath Keepers were caught because somehow the government obtained their encrypted signal messages. Everybody who is in the press is trying to figure this out, and there's hand wringing. It's pretty obvious. According to the CNBC article, it's not clear how investigators actually got access to the encrypted messages. So, does the government have a backdoor in Signal? Of course they don't, right? It'd be very unlikely that they do. Possible, but not probable. What really is going on here? And you know this because you've probably had people do this in your life or have thought about it yourself. There's a mole inside the Oath Keepers, obviously. And they're obviously screen recording or sending screenshots to the feds. And according to the indictment, Oath Keepers specifically recruit former military and law enforcement personnel. So if you were to recruit somebody in law enforcement or the military, and that was your target, it's possible that one of them would have put themselves out there to be recruited. In other words, I work for the FBI, or I'm a CIA person, whatever. I'm a spook, in whatever context. I'm a double agent. So I start posting to Oath Keepers message boards on Facebook, yada, yada. I'm active in a subreddit, wherever they're hanging out. And that person is either flipped or they set themselves up to be recruited. You get the idea. So through their lawyers, members of the Oath Keepers facing charges are claiming they were part of a security detail hired to protect conservatives like Roger Stone. Now, I'm going to do a little reading here. And again, I don't want this to be political, left versus right. This is just about a group of crazy people. Full stop. These people are nuts. And, there have been many left-wing crazy organizations. You may be too young to remember them, but we had the Black Panthers, and we famously had the Weather Underground and the BLA. So all these organizations were violent left organizations. They sought change through violence, and overthrowing the government, in fact, was part of the left's agenda in the 60s. These radical groups, which made it into the 70s and 80s, literally had on their agenda, we have to fight the government. That's how crazy they were, or inspired if you believe that our government is a tyranny and needs to be stopped. I do not think that. I think we have a pretty great democracy here that's worth protecting. So let me just read you what is in this essentially Homeland season 5 or 6. Like, this is literally the reboot of Homeland. And this is from the indictment. From the Department of Justice. Beginning in late December 2020, via encrypted and private communication applications, Rhodes and various co-conspirators coordinated and planned to travel to Washington, D.C. on or around January 6, 2020, the date of the certification of the Electoral College votes. Some members of Oath Keepers believe that the federal government has been co-opted by a cabal of elites actively trying to strip American citizens of their rights. Cuckoo. They explicitly focus on recruiting current and former military, law enforcement, and first responder personnel. The organization's name alludes to the oath sworn by members of the military and police to defend the Constitution from all enemies, foreign and domestic. They coordinated travel across the country to enter Washington, D.C. This all checks out, right? We all saw this with our own eyes. And we saw them trying to fly home and getting, deplaned because they didn't want to have terrorists on planes. Wow, what a radical concept. Equipped themselves with a variety of weapons, donned combat and tactical gear, and were prepared to answer Rhodes' call to take up arms at his direction. I'm reading literally from this indictment. Some co-conspirators also amassed firearms on the outskirts of Washington, D.C., distributed them among QRF, Quick Reaction Force teams. So these are military people who were amassing firearms, putting them outside of Washington, D.C., just out the outskirts so they didn't get caught. So they were ready to do quick reaction forces. Like, they were basically making their own SEAL teams, their own strike teams, and plan to use, back to quoting, and plan to use the firearms in support of their plot to stop the lawful transfer of presidential power. Now, let's read some quotes from the indictment regarding the day of the insurrection. Around 2:30 p.m., I'm quoting now, members of the Oath Keepers, many of whom were wearing paramilitary clothing and patches with the Oath Keepers' name, logos, and signet, yes, we saw that, marched in a stack formation called Stack 1, up the east steps of the Capitol to the outside of the Capitol Rotunda doors. At the time, the doors were closed and guarded by Capitol police officers. Stack 1 joined the mob of people, some of whom attacked officers and tried to enter the Capitol. As a side note, I tweeted these videos. Like, they literally beat cops within inches of their lives. The cops did not draw their guns, right? I'm not quoting here. I'm just giving you some color commentary. These cops are heroes for not drawing their guns and shooting these people, because if they had, there would have been dozens of people dead, because they had plenty of firearms to fight this fight. And these brave cops literally let themselves be beaten to not have to shoot Americans who were beating them and hitting them with pepper spray and bear spray and all kinds of stuff. So let's continue reading. They yelled, among other things, "Take their shields and our house." Attackers assaulted officers using pepper spray, flagpoles, and numerous improvised weapons and projectiles. They also disarmed the officers by stealing their shields and pushing them away from the rotunda doors. At 2:38 p.m., the doors were breached, and Stack 1 stormed into the Capitol alongside the mob. During the attack on the Capitol, rotunda doors and surrounding facades suffered damage worth thousands of dollars. Another quote from the indictment: "While certain Oath Keeper members and affiliates outside Washington, D.C. breached the Capitol grounds and building, others remained stationed just outside the city in QRF teams." Again, QRF, Quick Reaction Force. It is a military term from an armed rapid response unit used in developing situations. Back to quoting: "The QRF teams were prepared to rapidly transport firearms and other weapons into Washington, D.C. in support of operations aimed at using force to stop the lawful transfer of presidential power." And we've seen big tech not comply with government requests from time to time. Remember in 2016, the court case of the FBI wanted to unlock the San Bernardinos, those terrorists' iPhones, and Apple declined to do that. FBI used a third party. I believe it was an Israeli company. I forgot the name of it. And related, big tech is getting called out by the government over the January 6th attack. So just wrapping up this take here, this was really dangerous. And, let me give you my take on this. Obviously, this was all coordinated online, and they were using Signal, and a lot of the information from big tech hasn't been given over yet. But to just make this not political, we need to assess this as Americans. And I'll just, for those of you who care about my position, I think most of the people who stormed the Capitol were caught up in basically mob behavior, group behavior. And they probably did little to no damage. So anytime you bring up what happened at the Capitol on January 6th, there's like, oh, it was like a party. It was like an out of control party. Some people will say riot. Other people say insurrection. And we've got this big debate over terms. Okay, two things could be true. The majority of people there were probably just caught up in mob behavior. And yes, some of them might have walked between the stanchions, the velvet ropes, and done no damage. And some of them might have done silly things like steal a lectern or, do very little damage. Other ones, were doing serious damage, and it was gross. And then obviously there was a lot of criminal behavior, 700 arrests to date. And now this, the insurrection charges basically. But the second idea that you have to be able to keep in your head is that there were a group of people who had a very dangerous plan, who drove across the country, acquired weapons, set up a military operation, and they were willing, like Ashley Babbitt is her name. She died on January 6th. Most of you have seen this video, tragically, and she was a military person. And Secret Service had their guns drawn on her and were begging her to not breach the Capitol's third doors. And the rumors are there were politicians that the Secret Service were protecting, potentially Pence, potentially Pelosi. And they were searching for Pelosi and chanting for Pence and Pelosi's names. This woman was so deranged and had such conviction that she literally took a bullet in her neck, I believe, and died. And when you have people acting in a mob, they can get so fermented with rage that they stop thinking clearly. And literally, this poor woman, Ashley, jumped through that window and took a bullet and died with the Secret Service pointing multiple guns at her. And you've seen the video. That's how crazy this was. And if you're willing to beat up cops and take a bullet, you can be certain that they would have beaten and potentially killed politicians. And we would be looking at this saying, you know what? This was, more than just a riot. This was more than just a out of control protest. And what we have to think about is, when did this happen and who are these people? This is a terrorist organization, Oath Keepers. This is a radical terrorist organization, no different than the Weather Underground on the left, no different than Al-Qaeda. We could debate their abilities. We could debate, if Black Lives Matter and the riots we saw during those protests were justified. I don't believe they are. I don't believe any violence is justified. But this is serious, dangerous stuff. And for me, I just look at this and said, well, they had an option here. these individuals could have taken an option to do a peaceful protest. In other words, the Oath Keepers who were coordinating all of this and who were obviously protecting Roger Stone, and Roger Stone is besties with Trump, this whole group of people could have said, you know what, we're going to take a peaceful approach here. And we would look at this through a completely different lens. Had those people said, we're going to surround the Capitol, we're going to sit down, we're going to lock arms, we're going to handcuff ourselves to each other, and we're not leaving. And we're going to chant and protest and bang drums, just like all the hippie dippies do when they're protesting an oil pipeline, or they're protesting to save the whales, or wrapping themselves around some old growth trees. This is what environmentalists do. By the way, this is what Martin Luther King did, right? Peaceful protest. If you cannot be peaceful, do not join the protest. Stay home. That's what Martin Luther King instructed people to do. These people took an opposite approach, just like the Weather Underground takes an opposite approach on the left. And this approach is, let's go there, let's seize the building, let's have weapons ready, and let's beat cops, and let's go find these people and do physical harm to them. And that's really what's disturbing about this. And we need to be able to look at this through the lens of what were the options these people had to protest if they really felt passionate about it, and what options did they choose? And they chose violence. And that's never acceptable. And that's the end of my little rant on this. Good? Okay. Anything?
Good.
Okay. Let's see what people said in the noties. It was shameful. I agree. It's shameful. And it really, you don't have to even, you could be a Republican and say this is shameful. You could have voted for Trump and say this is shameful. You could be against the Black Lives Matter protests and the violence we've seen there and still think this is shameful. I think you have to be intellectually honest about this. That's what I tried to do in summarizing this speech for all of you, which is violence is immoral and violent protest is immoral.
The House subcommittee story.
Okay, really quick. 3, 2. Okay, in related news, the House Select Committee investigating the attacks on the U.S. Capitol. This is different than the criminal charges the DOJ is pursuing with the FBI. They issued subpoenas to tech companies that provided inadequate response to their request for information, as I mentioned above. I believe this is these small group of people, the Oath Keepers, which I think there are 30,000 members, 40,000 members in this group, and who knows how many were there, probably hundreds or if not thousands. We'll figure that out over time. In a statement, the committee said YouTube, Meta, Reddit, and Twitter did not provide proper information and records on the spread of misinformation, efforts to overturn the 2020 election, domestic violent extremism, and foreign influence in the 2020 election. The committee chairman, Representative Thompson, a Democrat from Mississippi, said in the statement, quote, 2 key questions from the Select Committee are how the spread of misinformation and violent extremism contributed to the violent attack on our democracy, and what steps, if any, social media companies took to prevent their platforms from being breeding grounds for radicalizing people to violence. It's disappointing that after months of engagement, we still don't have the documents and information necessary to answer these basic questions. The Select Committee is working to get answers for the American people and help ensure nothing like January 6th ever happens again. We cannot allow our important work to be delayed any further. So we really don't have enough information here, and we don't know exactly what the platforms didn't give, or if the requests from our government and from this committee are so broad that they're impossible. So if you said, hey, explain to us how people got radicalized online, that seems very general. Now, if you said, hey, here is an Oath Keepers group, and we know it's an Oath Keepers group because the DOJ identified these 10 leaders, and 6 of them are in this group, and 4 of them are in this group, and we know they're involved in these groups. Give us that information. That's a pretty easy request for information. Here, the path to radicalization seems like very broad, right? And then what did they do to prevent it? I'm not sure people talking about the fact that they believe the election was stolen or there might be voting irregularities. I don't think you can police that because that's a valid discussion. Like we probably have had the discussion here on This Week in Startups many times of, are these voting machines hackable? Like that's a completely valid discussion. So I'm going to give the tech companies a little bit of the benefit of the doubt here because we don't know exactly how broad these are. But in the statement, the committee reported YouTube had live streams of the attack along with conversations pertaining to the planning of the attack. So those should be public. If they were live streams, they should be publicly available. All you have to do is say, give us everything on this IP address on this day, January 6th, from this hour to this hour in this geolocation. Very simple. Meta platforms, that's Facebook, were used to share messages of hate, violence, incitement, misinformation, disinformation, conspiracy theories. Were used to coordinate Stop the Steal movement. Stop the Steal, as you know, is a far right or maybe conservative movement supporting the conspiracy theory that there was massive voter fraud in the 2020 election. Reddit's R the Donald community was the origin for the website thedonald.win, which hosted discussions and plans for the attack. So, it's pretty hard to talk to these platforms, just like it'd be very hard to go to Verizon, or to Moleskin if people were taking notes in their books and say, hey, can we get the notes on how these people were radicalized? It's like, well, we're Verizon or we make, journals. This is like one step more detailed. So in the example of YouTube, as I explained, they could find the information, but it's kind of hard to find a discussion in people's Gmail or on a message group about this. Twitter, of course, was used to communicate about plans for the attacks. That's no surprise. Everybody coordinates on Twitter, and to amplify all these things. So I don't think, in looking at this, I think the framing by the committee or these Democrats, I think the framing is probably to make tech look like bad guys here. But the truth is, it might just be hard to give them what they're asking for. It's very easy to give them very specific things. Give us all the activity and DMs between this group of people on these dates. That's easy. Give us everybody whose IP addresses and we're posting from the Capitol building. Pretty easy. And they did. And that's why 700 people have been arrested or have had charges against them. I think they settled a lot of those before they got to the Oath Keepers. So next up on the program, we have an OK Boomer segment with Alex Mazmej. OK Boomer. When we have an OK Boomer segment with Alex Mazmej. He is a French entrepreneur who raised $20,000 in a personal token sale back in 2020. He sold 10% of the $ Alex token supply against $20,000. And he allows token owners to vote on major life decisions and is giving them 15% of his salary for 3 years. Fascinating. So if he were to make $100,000 a year, that would be $45,000. They paid in for $20,000. I guess they would double their money. So he's basically selling his future income, like an income sharing arrangement, which we've seen before. ICEs, like Lambda School does and other nursing schools do now. You can get a free degree or a discounted degree and then pay it back from your salary. The price of the Alex token as of January 13th was 11 cents, and the total market cap is unknown since the token is unlisted. He raised $20,000 in about 4 days. So I think this is fascinating. Rachel, what was the conversation like?
The conversation went extremely well. Actually has to be probably my favorite conversation I've had thus far. I found Alex from Twitter after asking everyone who's the best Gen Z in the NFT community. And he was recommended time and time again. He was recommended quite a few times. Overall, he was just really well-spoken, absolutely knew his stuff, and was able to explain everything to me in really simple details, which I loved because I think some of this stuff was a little over my head. So I hope everybody enjoys this.
Amazing. What a great idea. I, for one, love the idea of young people maybe not selling in perpetuity their future earnings, but what a clever way to pay for school and or pay for expenses. I think people want to take the risk of betting on a young person and being involved in their mentorship through voting. What a great experiment. And person could always just go work at DoorDash and make $60,000 a year and pay down their $20,000 advance pretty quickly. So great job getting this one. And congratulations. Thank you. Now moved out of your parents' basement.
Yes,
don't say where you live. Don't say where you live, but congratulations. We can hear the horns blaring. So you're not in the boondocks anymore. You're in a major city. And congratulations on a new look and feel for your studio.
No more dogs, unfortunately, in my background anymore. I know everybody absolutely loved seeing the dogs and hearing the dogs bark, but now you get car horns and construction.
Now you're going to get car horns, ambulances, and people.
Sometimes you get yellers.
Yeah, you will get the yellers.
We have one local yeller down below. Very fun.
As somebody who spent time in the city where you're now living, noise canceling headphones, sound machine, air purifier. You put 2 or 3 of these things together and you get a good night's sleep. That's all. Blackout curtains, you'll get there. All right.
Thank you.
Great job, Rachel, and enjoy. the OK Boomer section as we have on Fridays.
All right, Jason, before you go, just do one quick before the OK Boomer, I'm going to do some quick plugs.
Okay.
And then I have the plug at the top.
And okay, before we get to OK Boomer, a couple of quick plugs. Where am I? Okay. And well, I'm going to do these two plugs. I want you to do plugs at the end of the show, but this is going to be in between. Is what you're saying, Nick?
Yeah, just for the Founder University iterations.
Okay, everybody, quick plug of something we like to do to help the founder community. Both of our Founder.University iterations are coming up in February. We do two types of Founder Universities. One, it's a 2-day intensive course. One is a 2-day intensive course. This one is for female founders only, women founders only. You'll get lessons on running and optimizing your startup, free legal advice from our friends at Wilson Sonsini, candid feed pitchback from me, and more. It's February 14th and 15th, and you can apply at intensive.founder.university. Apply at intensive.founder.university. It's our 2-day intensive. Again, we're trying to meet more female founders so we can invest in them. And by having a dedicated event just for women, we do other ones for underrepresented founders and just for everybody. We want to see a little more change in the ecosystem. And this is how we are able to find and recruit more women to invest in. Then we're going to have our 12-week cohort number 2. You may have heard me talk about, we created a 12-week course. It's essentially free. I'll explain that in a moment. We just finished our first Founder U cohort, and I've invested in some of the companies. So now we're doing cohort 2. The first cohort, we had 100 people start. I think 94 finished, or 95 will finish. This time, we're going to try to double it to 200. Cohort 1 had a company accepted into a launch accelerator before even completing the course, which means we put $100,000 into that company. The deadline to apply is February 14th. It kicks off 2 weeks later on February 28th. You can apply for the 12-week course, which happens at night. It's twice a week. You can do it if you have a full-time job. Is course.founder.university. Course.founder.university. You can find out more about both programs at founder.university. And please follow twitter.com/founderuni. And we're really starting to up our social game. Founder UNI is pretty active. And for the 12-week course, we charge people $700 to reserve their spot. And if they come to all 12 weeks or have an excused absence for a week or two, we just charge them back their $700. Happy to report, I think in this last class, 96 out of 100 people completed the course. So or something like that. So we'll charge like 5 people for burning the spot in the course and not completing it. And so if you complete it, it's free. It's on me. If not, we charge you. It's just basically a way for us to make sure people don't apply and not show up. Okay, great job to the team at Founder University. Good job, Charlie and Jackie. Good? Intro?
Good. Intro's right below it.
Okay, 3, 2. Okay, Molly is out again today. She got the Omicron, but she's doing great. Nothing to worry about there. I'm going to break down on today's show the Oath Keeper I'm going to break down today the Oath Keeper I'm going to break down today the Oath Keeper indictments from the January 6th insurrection. They were caught by having their encrypted signal messages compromised. So I'm going to explain how that happened because nobody seems to know. And is there a backdoor? I don't think so. I'm going to explain to you my theory. And I'm going to read some excerpts from the indictment, which read like a Homeland reboot. They're insane. And then I'm going to talk about Google, Facebook, Reddit, and Twitter being subpoenaed by the House Committee investigating the Capitol riots, and are they withholding information, or is the House Committee being a little too broad in their requests? Are they responsible? We're going to go take a look at that and do a deep dive, and then an awesome OK Boomer segment. Stick with us. It's a great episode.
Good.
All right. Anything else you need from me? Just upload the file, JK, and we're good.
Just upload that file. Well, you're going to need to do ad reads anyway after all
For today?
Yes. Because
guys,
remember I asked you to do ad reads
guys,
yesterday? Remember what you said to me?
Don't slow it down.
Do you remember what you said to me about ad reads?
I said good for you.